All right. I think we are live. Hello, everyone. It's good to be back. I haven't been able to do this for a few weeks because I was out of town. I was out of the country. So back now. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for watching. Thank you to Den, who is helping out as always with moderation. I heard there was like a Discord party while I was gone, so hopefully that was nice. And that also means there's like 3 weeks worth of stories I'm trying to catch up on. And so, anyway, we're going to do as much of this as I can tonight. We'll get around to this. As always, you could support the channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. I really appreciate that. And along the way, if you want to leave a super chat, we will get to questions in between stories. There's so much to discuss. Okay. Um, Thanks for being here tonight. I figured we would start by talking about the Republican platform because that was actually released this week, the official GOP platform for 2024. And the thing is, I mean, this is supposed to be a list of what the party stands for heading into any election. And part of it was newsworthy because 4 years ago they didn't even bother with it. They basically said, "We don't have any ideas anymore. It's whatever Trump wants." So they didn't actually have a new platform in 2020, and in 2016, that's the last time they put something together, and it was insane. So it's been a while since we've seen a list of what the GOP wants to say it stands for. And look, there's a lot in the new document that I find concerning. That's what I want to talk about, especially and specifically when it comes to church state separation, when it comes to Christian nationalism. That's the stuff I want to talk about. But I heard one complaint repeatedly from a lot of conservatives, ironically. This is what they are saying to each other, it seems. Like, check this out. This is a tweet from one conservative commentator. The 2016 RNC platform mentions God 16 times. The 2024 RNC platform draft mentions God just 2 times. As if they have somehow gotten less religious and that's a bad thing. Um, Look, what this guy is referring to is if you just do a control like find for the word God, technically he's correct. It appears 16 times 8 years ago, appears 2 times now. He's partly wrong because actually in 2016 it only appeared 15 times. One time the Republicans mentioned the word Godzilla, and he's counting that as a win. But again, this is not like an apples to apples comparison, partly because in 2016 that document was 66 pages. This year's document is 16, so it's about a quarter of the length. So that's interesting. And here's the thing that they're not telling you. The Republicans right now are well aware that their ideas suck, that the American public is very much against so much of what they stand for. So this time around, they actually chose not to get very specific. They don't have a lot of detailed policy ideas that they're talking about. They have a lot of vague, general, like stuff that they're for and against, usually against. Um, but they don't get very specific. And they try really hard not to mention like overt Christian nationalism stuff, but it's baked into the platform. And I will show you what I mean. By the way, the 2 mentions of God that appear in 2024's platform, they're kind of generic ones too. One of them is it says that with trust in God's good grace, we'll make America great again. Does that count? Who cares? And the other one says that the GOP's foreign policy plan will protect our rights under God. So even the 2 mentions of God are kind of just generic rhetorical flourishes and not anything that suggests Christian nationalism. But make no mistake, this document, just like the one in 2016, is a gift to Christian nationalists. It's really the same platform conservative Christians would have written, except like Republican strategists went through it to make it sound more plausible. And so if you understand how they work, it's not hard to read between the lines. So I'm going to give you some examples of this just to show you what I mean. Let me show you right here. By the way, this is the beginning of the platform. This is the summary. I just want you to notice the all caps all the time Trump style writing here. Seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. And that's how it begins. This is the summary. Honestly, if you screenshotted this and just posted it, someone would think you're joking. There's no way this is what the Republican Party stands for. Number 17, keep men out of women's sports. That's the biggest issue facing the country right now. You would think this is a parody, and it's not. This is like the opening of the document. They only have 16 pages, and they have wasted 5 pages just with BS like this. Okay, but I'm going to get to the actual substance here. So let's go to chapter 1, all right? Chapter 1 is all about defeating inflation, and I'm going to scroll down to, how about number 4? Stop illegal immigration. I repeat, chapter 1 about inflation, but I want to point out the illegal immigration thing because this all goes back to church-state separation. Republicans will secure the border, deport illegal aliens, and reverse the Democrats' open borders policies that have driven up the cost of housing, education, and healthcare for American families. But look, under Donald Trump between, 2017, 2021, what did it mean to deal with immigration? That meant a Muslim ban or a ban on people entering if they're coming from Muslim majority countries. It meant a preference for Christian refugees over people of other faiths, something that even a lot of Christian leaders condemned. Trump said in a speech last year, let me show you this. He said in a speech last year that he's totally going to do all of that again. I will implement strong ideological screening of all immigrants, he said, reading from the teleprompter. If you hate America, if you want to abolish Israel, apparently ad-libbing, if you don't like our religion, which a lot of them don't, if you sympathize with the jihadists, then we don't want you in our country and you're not getting in, right? What do you think he means by our religion? Even the Republicans' plan to deal with immigration goes back to Christians good, everyone else evil. It's very much the Peter Griffin scale of like, the whiter you are, it's okay, and the browner you get, no thank you. So even their immigration platform is an example of Christian privilege. You know what I mean? Okay, let me go back to the platform. Let me scroll down to chapter 4. This one's interesting as well. Oops, I missed it. Here we go. The American dream. We got to make it affordable for everybody. Well, look at this. Like accessible higher education. To reduce the cost of higher education, Republicans will support the creation of additional, drastically more affordable alternatives to traditional four-year college degree, which on the surface would be fine. I don't think everyone has to go to college. So, like, there's nothing wrong with that per se. There's actually something on another page that talks about universal school choice. But think about how Republicans deal with education and public education specifically. In red states, they've adopted voucher programs that take that takes billions of dollars out of public education and sends it to private, usually Christian schools. Republicans also support homeschooling, which is almost always a conservative Christian thing to do. Like, what are these prongs in their platform promoting higher education, but only certain types? It's not a call for more religious indoctrination, because that's ultimately what they're trying to do. And it doesn't end there either. There is a bit, this is in chapter 7 here, if you could see this. Knowledge and skills, not CRT and gender indoctrination. Republicans will ensure children are taught fundamentals like reading, history, science, and math, not left-wing propaganda. We will defund schools that engage in inappropriate political indoctrination of our children using federal taxpayer dollars. Just look at this. They want to teach kids reading. Republicans are also the ones who want to ban all the books they don't like. They want to teach history. But no, they don't, because if you talk about like comprehensive American history and the history of slavery and the fact that the Civil War is based on slavery and stuff like that, like they don't want to teach that type of history. They want this revisionist David Barton type of history. That's not true. Science, I mean, that's just a gimme. You know, Republicans are not fans of science, and that they're going to figure out a way to be mad about math too. Remember years ago when they went after like Common Core math? They're trying to teach kids how to think about. We don't like that. Just algorithms all the time. So again, like my point is, even something like we want to teach kids the things goes back to right-wing propaganda and religious bigotry. I mean, gender indoctrination. That's Republicans speak for we hate trans kids. We don't want kids finding out that gay people exist and are happy. So we don't want them reading about any of this. So like all of this is all an attempt to keep kids in a bubble. And also, by the way, I say this as a former math teacher, they're all about focusing on like the core curriculum, but also what are they leaving out? They're leaving out the stuff that a lot of students really gravitate toward: music, art, PE, in the case of, I'm sure, some kids somewhere. Like they don't really put a lot of emphasis into that because they don't like that stuff, because that's the sort of stuff kids like that helps them break out of their bubble and give them new experiences. And that definitely goes against what evangelicals want. Look at the very next thing on this list. Number 7, promote love of country with authentic civics education. Republicans will reinstate the 1776 Commission, promote fair and patriotic civics education, and veto efforts to nationalize civics education. We will support schools that teach America's founding principles and Western civilization. Like, listen, if Saudi Arabia said, this is what we're doing, we're teaching kids they have to love our country, or else, I mean, I think everyone would say, yeah, that's not how you teach history, where you act like you're the best country ever and you've never done anything wrong. But that's totally what they're trying to do. The 1776 Commission is basically the right-wing response to the 1619 Project that centers American history on slavery, because that's pretty much how America became America. They don't want kids learning about that because whites might feel bad about it. Again, this idea that we want a patriotic civics education. If you have to teach kids to love the country, maybe the country needs to do a better job of giving people a reason to love it. You know what I mean? This goes on for a while. There's another section that calls for a classic liberal arts education, which is also code for like, we definitely don't want them reading books that were not written by like white dudes from 100 or 200 years ago. It's all code. It's all code for the stuff they want. And the stuff they want is very disturbing. Look at this one I found interesting too. I'm losing it. There we go. This is in another section. Freedom to pray. This is in their platform. Republicans will champion the First Amendment right to pray and read the Bible in school and stand up to those who violate the religious freedoms of American students. Guess what? Every student and teacher and administrator already has the right to pray and read the Bible in school. Literally, no one was taking that away from them. Who are these people who are violating the religious freedoms of American students? They don't exist. Everyone can pray. No one was taking away that right. The thing church-state separation groups have been going against is like when adults, coaches, teachers, administrators force kids to pray the way they want to pray. Like when you're forcing kids, when you're a football coach who wants to pray at midfield and create a huge spectacle. Yeah, we're going to challenge that. If a teacher says, yeah, we are all going to read the Bible at the beginning of class, yeah, we're going to go against that. If Louisiana passes a law saying we're going to put the 10 Commandments in every classroom, but only one specific version of the 10 Commandments that even like most Christians don't subscribe to, yeah, we're going to go against that. That's indoctrination. But they're acting like people are anti-Christian or something, which they're clearly not. Here's another thing that is also in this list. I read from conservatives that they were very upset, some of them, because there wasn't enough God in here. They backed away from abortion. They backed away from like LGBTQ issues because Republicans are cowards or something like that. And that's not true either. This is in a section on like common sense, bringing common sense to government. Well, look at number 1, empowering American families. Read this. Republicans will promote a culture that values the sanctity of marriage, the blessings of childhood, the foundational role of families, and supports working parents. We will end policies that punish families. Okay, let's go through those. The sanctity of marriage. What does that mean? I mean, the Supreme Court has already hinted that it's ready to overrule Obergefell and allow red states to allow states to pick and choose how they deal with gay couples, as in they could deny them a marriage license or something. Conservative Christian groups have been demanding that for decades, and it doesn't matter what surveys say about the growing acceptance of marriage equality, even among religious groups. Right-wing leaders are trying to overturn civil rights. And this idea that they want to care about the blessings of childhood. Like, no, they don't. They don't care about children. The Republicans are not for free universal pre-K. They're not for making sure every parent has a good public school accessible to them. They definitely don't want, assault weapons out of schools. So, like, what the hell are they talking about in any of this stuff? There's another section in Chapter 8, which it goes to religion. Combat anti-Semitism. Republicans condemn anti-Semitism and support revoking visas of foreign nationals who support terrorism and jihadism. We will hold accountable those who perpetuate violence against Jewish people. Like, okay, good. I don't want violence against Jewish people. But what are they talking about? In their mind, they're conflating actual terrorists with like college students and professors who are like, maybe we should look at what's happening in Gaza, and maybe slaughtering Palestinian kids is a bad thing to do. And maybe the US shouldn't be giving the Israeli government weapons to murder kids with. I would think that goes back to we want to make sure kids have a good childhood, but no, it doesn't matter unless you're an American kid, apparently, and only a select handful of American kids while we're at it. And by the way, this is the Republican Party. You think they actually care about condemning anti-Semitism? Of course they don't. They are the ones who say every Democrat they don't like is Soros-backed, right? Their allied lobbying groups spend millions of dollars to defeat politicians who don't support everything Benjamin Netanyahu wants. So, like, anytime you criticize Israel, Republicans say that's anti-Semitic. So, like, their definition doesn't really matter here. One last thing, I think, in Chapter 9 here, Republicans will defend religious liberty. I'm not gonna read all of this, but again, they say they want a federal task force on fighting anti-Christian bias that will investigate all forms of illegal discrimination, harassment, and persecution against Christians in America. It's this very last part right there. And notice how they say this. Like, they say, we want to defend religious liberty. And then at the end of the paragraph, they're like, yeah, but only for Christians. They don't care about religious liberty. They're like, you know who has it really bad in America? It's 99% of the Republicans elected to Congress. Those are the people who have a boot on their body or something like that. I'm sorry, I forgot the metaphor. If you think Christians are the ones who are the most persecuted in America, I just want Republicans to tell me which group they would rather trade places with. Like, it is laughable to think Christians are harassed and persecuted when the reality is that conservative Christians are usually the ones doing the harassing and persecuting. I lied. There was one more part I did want to talk about here. Number 4 right there. Republicans will protect and defend a vote of the people from within the states on the issue of life. This is the part that a lot of right-wing activists got pissed off about, because they're like, the Republicans should have been against abortion, federal ban on abortion, and they're backing away from that, and we're very mad about it. But look at what they say in like the second sentence here. We believe that the 14th Amendment guarantees that no person can be denied life or whatever. They're highlighting the 14th Amendment as basically saying, hey, if the Supreme Court says there's a constitutional right to life and that extends to a fetus, the Supreme Court can totally make a national abortion ban. So it's in here. They're very much anti-abortion in any circumstances, no exceptions. It is a very extreme thing they're saying in this platform. And of course, that is the wish of the religious right. This is a religious prong of this platform. And the only thing, like at the very end, they realized, okay, this is bad politics for us. So they say, we will oppose late term abortion. Notice they don't say how many weeks that is. It's just whenever. To most Christians, like half a minute old is a late term abortion because there should be no abortion. And if you just say we oppose late term abortion, they can just back the clock to as recently or in the past as they want. So, like 4 weeks into a pregnancy, hey, guess what? Now that counts as late term abortion. They also say we support mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. BS. They don't care about prenatal care. They were ready to overturn Obamacare way back when, right? Access to birth control? No, they oppose birth control. They oppose the use of birth control. They don't want kids learning about birth control. Like, who are they trying to convince here? Because we've seen what they do, and it's not this stuff. And of course, IVF, I know they have to say this because it's touchy even within their party, but a Republican court in like Arkansas, was it Arkansas? Arkansas said, yeah, we're done with IVF. That counts as abortion. It's illegal. And then like the legislators are like, oh, we can protect IVF. Too many Christian women like it. Again, this is what's in the platform. This is what they're doing. This goes on for a while. So I'm going to summarize all this. Okay, you get my point. This is a very religious document. It is a really dangerous document. If they implemented any of the things they really want on this wish list, it would be horrible for America. This is why you don't vote for any Republican up or down the ballot. And it's also telling because if you go back to that tweet I showed you earlier, where some idiot was like, look, they don't mention God. They only mention God like 2 times. Like, yeah, but they don't need to mention God. God is all over the platform. And if you read the platform, you realize it's a wish list for the religious right. Like, all of this is exactly what Christians have been wanting for a long time, conservative Christians specifically. This is what we've come to expect from the GOP. Look, I know there are a lot of criticisms for Joe Biden, well-deserved criticisms of Joe Biden. But it doesn't matter which Democrat is on the ballot for president and certainly down ballot. If you don't want this stuff that I'm you go into law, then you vote for the Democrats up and down the line. A throwaway vote for like a third party candidate, that's a waste of time. You're not helping. This is the platform you're going to be implementing if you're throwing away your vote like that. Or if you decide to stay home because every Democrat didn't meet your purity test. How selfish do you have to be to care so little about everyone else in the country who actually would be harmed by this type of platform? I want to show you one last thing before I'm done with this story. There is a right-wing atheist group called Atheists for Liberty. It's the group where all the bad people go when they've been kicked out of all the other groups, like their board of advisors here. Who's the leader of their board of advisors? Oh, look, Dave Silverman, who's been accused of sexual misconduct and all that. If you go up and down, you have a lot of maybe no names, but also right-wing cranks. Peter Boghossian is on there. There's a James Lindsay, who's very popular with the conspiratorial right-wing people. Just a lot. Robert Price, who is a misogynist and has written some horrible things about that. Michael Sherlock, who can't say a sentence without calling women the C word or using the C word. Oh, look, another sex predator in the middle there who's been accused of stuff. I mean, again, this is Atheists for Liberty. It's a right-wing group. But I wanted to show you a tweet from their president, because that tweet I showed you about how God was less in the platform this year, you know how their president of the group responded to that tweet? I will show you. Here's how he responded to it. Progress, because God isn't mentioned as much. And wait, it's not just him. The group itself responded, probably the same dude, but like, we're losing some battles, but we're winning the war because the Republican Party is not mentioning God as much. How dumb do you have to be to think any of this? Like, progress? Where? The only way you say there's progress is if you use some superficial and meaningless metric for religiosity and never read what they're actually rating. I showed you what's in it. Like, it's religion up and down the line. It's insane right-wing conservative theology all over the place. And these people are trying to spike the football in the end zone, even though they're at the 50-yard line. Imagine how ignorant you have to be to think this platform is a victory for secularism, for church-state separation, that you're winning the war as the GOP becomes increasingly theocratic. Like, the Republican Party is not less religious than it used to be. Another Trump presidency would represent a step backwards for church-state separation and a leap into the arms of Christian fundamentalists everywhere. This platform, along with Project 2025, which has a lot of overlap, like, this is not progress. And for a right-wing atheist group to pretend like, look at what we did, everybody. We got Republicans to use the word God a little bit less and taking like a victory lap. Again, I'm just stunned by these people who love to call themselves critical thinkers and clearly didn't read the assignment, didn't do the assignment, didn't read any of this. Like, just utterly stupid. Okay, I'm done with this story. Let's take some questions. Thank you for that donation. Republicans also don't want kids learning about the Holocaust and how Hitler rose to power, since it mirrors their platform. Right on. Yeah, I mean, how many right-wing Candace Owens did it this week, where they're just flat out denying the Holocaust or saying, no, it wasn't 6 million Jews. It was like 14. I don't know, whatever number they want to use now. Yeah, they don't like teaching kids about history. Definitely not about fascism, because they're going to see the parallels. They definitely don't want them knowing about American history, because guess what? It doesn't make America great in a lot of ways. So, yeah, these are not the people you want in charge of education. Didn't the Democrats go on and try to do a cracking down on immigration thing in a bipartisan bill? Yeah, they tried to, in a way that I found really cruel and unfortunate. And I don't love that Biden was doing that, but also it shut Republicans up for a little bit. Trump told Republicans to reject it because accepting it would be some kind of win for the Dems. Yeah, Trump basically threw a wrench into that bipartisan attempt. So Biden then took further action to try to do it himself, which is what I'm referring to, which was cruel. Yeah, I mean, again, if you're asking me if I'm a fan of Democrats or Joe Biden specifically, the answer is no, not really. But despite whatever good stuff he's done, look at the threat on the other side. You only get, this isn't the UK elections. You get two choices, viable choices. It's either play defense right now as a Democrat and live on another day, or just give up on everything and let Christians take over the country. I don't know why people who watch a video like this, who capture state separation, actually want a better country where expertise matters and, you know, scientists have some say in what happens. If you care about any of that stuff, I cannot understand why you would want to vote for Republicans. I don't understand why they hate music and art so much. Usually because, I mean, the lyrics of a lot of songs make people think and interpret and critically, and art certainly supposed to make you think differently and challenge your perceptions, and that violates everything they love and hold so dear. And also, they think music and art is all just run by progressives and liberals, and they think it's indoctrination, more or less. It's why you don't see a lot of great right-wing music. You'll hear protest songs, just not a lot of right-wing music. Poisoning the future generation to fail on the world stage. Idiocracy, here we come. Like, I want to laugh, but it's so disappointing. And yet we are as close to that as ever before. It feels like it. It's not too late. Biden can step down. There could be other choices. We can be exciting. Could be. Arkansas is the crap state. Missouri sits on like a toilet, but they didn't go after IVF. That was Alabama. Damn it. I'm sorry. Thank you. Was it Alabama? My bad. Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, so I get the bad states confused. Do you want the truth? I'm not an atheist. I just appreciate the intelligence and honesty I find here. Hey, I appreciate that, Tracy. You don't need to be an atheist. Watch this. Honestly, I hope the stuff I'm sharing, I think a lot of Christians could watch it and they would agree with pretty much everything I say. So thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for being here. Please like and subscribe and all that stuff. And let me X out a million of these things so I can get to a different story. Oh, you're not going to like this one at all. Okay. I'm going to show you a picture of a family here. I'm going to remove myself from this so you could see the picture. I know a lot of people are blurred out there, but you see a woman, a man, and their little daughter sitting in his lap right there. And I'm going to tell you a story about their family that's disturbing, very, very disturbing. Okay, so basically, in 2022, early 2022, the girl you see in that picture, her name is Elizabeth Struess. She was found dead in her home. She was 8 years old at the time. She was living in Queensland, Australia. She had type 1 diabetes. And if you have type 1 diabetes, you need insulin shots every day. And her parents, the two people in that picture, they refused to give her insulin shots. They deprived her of the insulin shots for, I believe, 6 straight days. And that's how she died. Cruel, torturing. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. So instead of giving her the insulin shots, what did they do? You know where I'm going with this. They just prayed for her to get better. That's it. It never crossed their mind, by the way, that they could just attribute the discovery of insulin medication to God. They just prayed for her to get better, and she died. Because of course she did. She needed medicine. They chose faith healing over proven medicine, believing that's what God wanted. And this girl paid the price because of it. And the thing about this is that it wasn't even the first time something like this had happened to this girl, Elizabeth. In 2019, those same parents apparently withheld insulin from her as well. Elizabeth fell into a coma and had to be taken to a hospital. And I'll show you this. When she was in the hospital at the time, when she was admitted, she weighed only 29 pounds. It took her a month to recover. And because of that, when that happened, the authorities in Australia, they stepped in, they arrested the parents. Basically, her mom and dad were sentenced to, the dad was sentenced to 6 months in jail because he expressed some remorse. And the mom was sentenced to 18 months in jail. But because of the way the legal system works, the dad actually spent 0 time behind bars, and the mom only spent 5 months behind bars. And then she was allowed to go back home, but she was on parole. And the thing I just told you about them withholding the insulin, that happened a few weeks after mom came back home. So, no lesson was learned. They went away and they tried killing their daughter. It didn't work. She recovered. And then as soon as they were out of jail, they tried again and it worked. That's my takeaway from that story. So, I mean, obviously, horrific, horrific stuff. And you might be wondering, who the hell would do something like this? Why would these parents do that? I mean, surely at some point here, they figured out the girl needs the insulin shots, right? Well, this week, the reason I bring this up is because members of their church, including the parents, the 2 parents, and 12 other members of their church were on trial beginning this week over the death of that girl. And what the articles are basically saying is there were 14 people charged in some way of being involved in the death of Elizabeth. They basically say two people, the father and the leader of this group, the Saints, his name is Brendan Stevens, they were charged with murder because they not only withheld the insulin, apparently the prosecutors say they knew that that would be dangerous. The other 12 people, including the mother, maybe they didn't go that far. Maybe they just believed that God would protect the girl, but they didn't realize just how dangerous it would be if you didn't give the girl the insulin shot. So they're charged with manslaughter. But basically, there's only 23 people in this tight-knit little religious group of saints, and every single adult that is a member of that group is now on trial for the death of this girl, which good. They all should be. They should, if they had anything to do with this, if they allowed it to happen, I'm glad to see that they're in court and they risk going to jail for a long time because of this. The prosecutor said this group adhered to a belief that God heals and that medication is to be rejected unless it is in the nature of no more than first aid, like applying a Band-Aid. So, like, God is cool with Band-Aids, but like shots and vaccinations and things like that, absolutely not, is what these people believed. Some of this stuff may sound familiar to you because this is in the United States as well. There were faith healing cults in Oregon, in Washington State. Like in Oregon, I believe there was a group called the Followers of Christ Church, and their members killed several of their children over the past 2 decades by basically neglecting their treatable diseases. It's so bad that the legislature in Oregon had to remove faith healing as an exemption to the homicide law because it used to be an exemption to the homicide law. And they're like, maybe faith healing should also count as murder because these people all know what they're doing and we need to protect the kids. So, like, look, the simple fact is children should not be sentenced to death because their parents are brainwashed by Jesus. Faith healing is a myth. Faith healing is nothing more than a myth promoted by certain kinds of Christians. And look, it's one thing if you happen to be that kind of a Christian and you say, I'm sick, I'm just going to pray to get better. I don't need any medicine because I don't care what happens to you at that point. But when you deprive your baby or your child of medical treatment because of your irrationality and your delusions, you deserve to be charged with murder. And I'm glad that's what's happening in this case. I just want to show you one, I don't want to call it a silver lining because there's nothing happy about this story. But a couple years ago, when this first kind of made news after the girl died, her sibling, this is Jade Strews, she's the 25-year-old sister of Elizabeth. And years ago, in 2022, she was on like an Australian version of 60 Minutes. And she was saying she was working to take custody of her siblings at the time. She was trying to get all the other kids away from her parents and into her hands. She said of her parents, they're and the saints, she was saying of the religious cult, they're extreme, they're small, controlled. Jade here left the cult when she was 16 after coming out as a lesbian, and she's been sharing her story with the media ever since. I was actually looking to see if I could find an update. Like, what is Jade up to now? Are the kids in her custody? I couldn't find a good update about it. I'm really curious. But, like, I am stunned by the idea of someone who was 16 when she left this cult, only in her mid-20s now, even offering to take on the responsibility of being a parent because her parents are such a danger to her siblings. Like, imagine how much growing up you have to do in such a short amount of time because your parents are unable to get past their delusions and they're putting the rest of the family at risk here. But doesn't matter, even if she's 6, even if she's in her 20s, like, those kids would be much safer with her than the adults who thought prayer trumped medicine. So this trial is happening now. I don't know how long it'll take. For what it's worth, the 14 members of the Saints, they opted not to get a lawyer. They're all being tried together, like all for one, apparently. And there's no jury. It'll just be up to a judge to decide what happens to all of them. which is a very unusual situation. This is one where I'm going to be, I hope to follow this case because I want to know how this ends. Because I want some justice for this girl who did nothing wrong, except she was born to a family with parents who didn't give a shit about her. Okay, I'm going to stop there for that one. I'll take questions, but I'm ready to move on to a different story. Why was this child returned to the custody of her parents? Whoever didn't pull this child from that home also should be held accountable. You know what? I had that same question, Jeffrey, after she was in a coma, after she was in the hospital for nearly a month. Why was she allowed to go back home? And I don't know, because like the dad expressed remorse, like, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to do that. We thought we were doing the right thing. We've clearly learned our lesson. And maybe that's the reason they were allowed to take her into custody again, and then within a couple of weeks she was dead. I wonder if that's the reason, because I don't think even authorities are eager to take a child away from abusive parents if there's a reason to think the parents won't do it again. And I have to imagine they had reason to think it wasn't going to happen again, but I don't know. Why are some Christians obsessed with trying to force their God to perform a miracle instead of simply doing God's work? I mean, you're asking me why some people are religious. And again, there are plenty of Christians who will say everything happens for a reason. So when bad things happen, they're not just going to pray to reverse it, they're going to accept it. But there are plenty of people who are like, I'm not going to get a vaccine because I'm just going to pray for God to heal me. I mean, that happened during the pandemic. It's happening now. I mean, it's a disturbing thing. And again, there are plenty of Christians who will say, you could just say God gave us brains. God gave us science to figure out these medications and things like that. There's nothing unchristian about accepting medicine, but there are plenty of Christian scientists, there are plenty of smaller cults that just think, no, I'll just pray for healing. And the thing I always want to know is, okay, well, how come it's always you praying for someone else? And it's never like, oh, you broke your leg, so you're going to pray instead of going to see a doctor. It's never about them. It's always, let's hurt somebody else with my experiment here. What's the mindset that puts having faith over your child's life? I mean, you're right. That's the danger of delusion. That's what religious thinking does. That's what right-wing propaganda does. It makes you believe in these dumb conspiracies over what your eyes and brain and senses tell you is true. It's very disturbing. Um Again, it's not a mindset we could fix, except maybe we call it out. And clearly, this cult was so insular that they didn't have anyone inside their bubble that they were willing to listen to who could tell them, hey, maybe don't pray. Maybe just give your daughter the insulin shots and then pray. Waste your time after you give her the shot. They didn't allow anyone in that circle. Okay. I'm going to get to the next story here, um, because I don't like talking about that one that we just did because it's very disturbing. Okay. Where's the story I want to get to here? That's not the one I want. This is the one I want. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second here to get this stuff. Oh, did Hemming cover the story about the gay furry hackers that broke into Project 2025 and stole their data? I will tell you the question you're asking right now, that's pretty much all I know about it, because I don't know what they actually got. I don't know what data there is, because Project 2025 is like a 900 some page document with what Republicans want to do after they take over the government again. So, like, if you hack into their system, I don't actually know what the gay furry hackers stole that anyone else needs. Like, they put it in writing, all the disturbing stuff. So I didn't really read into it much more than that. But I did not cover it because I don't know what there is to cover. All right. I'm going to get to this next story here. This is a follow-up from a story I know I covered a while back. So I'm going to summarize what I talked about before, and I'll give you the update here. There was a church in Canada known as the Meeting House Church. And it was led by this guy in your picture. His name is Bruxy Cavey. He's one of those cool, hip pastors, and you could tell he's cool because he's not wearing a suit, and he's wearing a hat, and he has long hair. And yeah, I know you see this. He has a tattoo of Leviticus chapter 19, verse 28, which, of course, is the verse that says, thou shalt not have any tattoos. I paraphrase. But that's how hip and edgy he is. He'll show God who's boss. Okay, so Bruxy Cavey used to be the head of this church, the Meeting House. It was one of those churches that said, we're a church for people who are not into church because we're the cool church. And it appealed to a lot of people. At one point, it was known as he was known as Ontario's most influential pastor. And this guy was in charge of that church back in like 1997, and he ran it for decades, right? It became one of the largest vessels in the province for spreading Christianity. And the thing I talked about a couple of months ago is that this guy got in trouble in 2021. Here's a story from 2022 from the CBC, because this guy, Hamilton police charge former pastor of the Meeting House Church with sexual assault. Police believe there may be multiple victims. Yeah, so basically the head of this church was accused of sexually assaulting multiple people. The Meeting House soon hired someone to do an internal investigation, and she substantiated the claims of sexual abuse. In one case, she even said the alleged victim was underage. So very, very disturbing story for all these reasons. Bruxy Cavey is going to go on trial. I don't know if the trial has started yet, but he's supposed to go on trial very soon. He maintains that he is innocent. But there's a lot of lawsuits against the church. The lawsuits are seeking millions of dollars in damages. I think the independent advocate that the church hired, said there were ultimately 38 allegations of sexual misconduct against not just this guy, Bruxy Cavey, but 3 other pastors who worked at this place. That's how bad things were. Anyway, all of this happens. Church leaders keep insisting we changed our ways, created a new system to handle allegations. But now, and the reason I want to bring this up here is because there's an update to the church. Because they actually sent out an email to their supporters recently, and I want to show you this email. This is from like last week or maybe a couple weeks ago now. But basically, they sent out this email to their congregation saying they're shutting down temporarily, but they're just shutting down everything. And wait till you hear the reason that they've decided to close up shop. Because they said no weekend services anymore, no Sunday school, even like small groups where you might meet at somebody's house to discuss topics. We're not doing that either. The church is not sponsoring small groups, church gatherings, anything like that. Why not? Let me show you. If you scroll down here, our current insurer has advised us that they will be renewing our abuse liability and employment practices liability coverage as of June 30th, 2024. After an exhaustive search, most other insurers have declined to offer us this coverage. It is not responsible for us to continue to operate normal church activities without abuse liability and employment practices liability coverage. I just sit with that for a second. This church had insurance for sexual abuse, and their insurance provider basically said, we can't cover you anymore because you're like costing us way too much money. There's too much abuse going on, and it's just a drain on us, so we can't do this anymore. And because the church isn't getting sexual abuse insurance coverage, instead of just saying, well, maybe we just don't abuse people, they're like, you guys, we need to shut down the entire thing, because what if abuse happens and we don't have insurance for it? That is actually the mindset. The Christian Post did a story about this. Look at their headline. The Meeting House megachurch temporarily shutters because it can't get abuse insurance. Like, even the Christian Post is dunking on this church for good reason, because this is a very real thing that is happening. Unbelievable. Imagine your car insurance company says, we can't give you coverage because every time you drive on the road, you get an offender bender every time. At some point, they could obviously say, like, we're just going to raise your premium because we have to deal with you all the time. And the insurance company isn't saying you guys got to pay a lot more money. No, they're skipping right ahead to, there's no amount of money that's going to make this a good business decision for us. We're just not going to deal with you anymore. That's how bad things are at this church. And I want to go back to the email that the church sent to people. Because again, remember, they said, not only has our insurance provider said they can't work with us, we checked with all the other insurance providers for abuse coverage, and none of them wanted to work with us. And look at this. They say, like, we've totally tried to stop the abuse, but despite these positive changes, we are disappointed to learn that our history still causes insurers to view us as a significant go-forward risk. At this point, we are confident that we have engaged all the available insurers in Canada and some internationally who work with churches. However, we have learned in the last week that our search has not identified any insurers yet willing to provide the Meeting House with abuse liability coverage. They can't find anyone to cover them because of this stuff. One last thing they say in this email: for the protection of our staff, volunteers, vulnerable people, including kids and youth, and our wider church community, our transition board and network leadership team believe it is not responsible to continue engaging in ministry work through the Meeting House Church entity without full insurance coverage. Which, I'm glad they figured that out. Part of me wants to say, yes, this is the responsible thing for them to do. Like, good for you for saying, we don't want anyone to be in a situation that could end badly. And without the insurance, we cannot guarantee that there's going to be justice. So we're just going to close shop until we could get this insurance. Part of me wants to give them credit for that. But also, that's like thanking a serial killer for taking a night off. You do not, under any circumstances, have to hand it to them, right? There's one other thing I wanted to show you, because the church also put out an FAQ for church members. And look at this. Look at the first question in the FAQ. Is the Meeting House shutting down on June 30th? And they say, no, we're not shutting down. We're just pausing for a while until we find insurance. Okay, fine. We've gone over that. But look at this. Can I continue giving money to the Meeting House while we're on a pause? What would my giving go towards? And they're like, yes, exclamation point. We will totally take your money. Sure, we're not meeting. Sure, there's no Sunday school. There's no small group meetings, but we're totally going to take your cash if you want to give us cash. If that isn't more quintessentially church shit, I don't know what is. Christianity Today actually spoke with the head of a Christian church insurance provider, and they're like, so what do you think about all this stuff going on here? And I want to show you what that insurance provider said, because he explained why insurers may not want to work with this church anymore. Insurers may decline to provide liability coverage for ministries that don't have solid policies to handle abuse, according to this guy who works with a company that insures more than 4,000 ministries in California. To him, it's a stewardship issue. Other churches' premiums shouldn't be spent covering another organization's repeated mistakes. If there's been a pattern of abuse, et cetera, every time there's a claim, it's going back to these offering plates at other ministries. All of which is to say, one church in Canada was doing so much abuse And the insurance premiums would have been so high that it eventually would have spread to everyone else who needs insurance for sexual abuse, all the other churches. And they're all like, dude, why do my premiums have to go up? Because this one church can't get its act together. And so this dude is saying, yeah, I get why they would cut them off. It totally makes sense. It is wild that this is a thing. Like, it's not even non-Christians like me saying the church's revised policies are still not good, enough. Because in fact, remember I said they hired an advocate to do like independent investigation into their problem. Well, guess what? They fired her eventually, or they pushed her out, and they said, we got our own system in place now. We don't need you. And the person they hired was like, you guys, your new system is not good. Like, it doesn't guarantee anonymity in the right way. It doesn't do enough. And they're like, whatever, we don't need you. And yeah, now the insurers don't want to work with them. Like, all of this, these are other Christians saying it's gone too far, and the church still isn't taking the problem seriously enough. What a fall from grace for a church that used to draw in like 5,700 people every weekend as of like 2018 to about 1,500 now. That's what their attendance has dropped to, and I'm sure it's dropping even more. So I think all of this is a clear sign that what was going on at the meeting church, it was never about one pastor. It was never about a few bad apples. Like, the entire church was and remains the problem, because the current leaders are clearly not up to the task of doing the job, and the people in the pews aren't putting enough pressure on them to do the right thing. And I would also go so far as to say, if you still attend that church and you give it money and you grant it legitimacy, you're sending the message that you don't give a damn about the victims either. So if pausing means those people are going to leave the church and stop giving it money, good, that's a win-win for everybody. But I'm still laughing at the idea that this church had to shut down because they couldn't find sex abuse insurance. All right, I'm going to pause there for that story. What else is there to talk about? What questions we got? Do all churches have to have abuse liability insurance? I bet they do. This is something I couldn't get an answer to. I looked for that answer because I didn't know that all churches needed that insurance. I'm sure all churches have insurance for the same reason homeowners might have homeowners insurance. It covers a lot of specifics, and usually the specifics don't matter. You just want to be protected in case of an emergency. But I realize if you're a church, not only do you need like property insurance, you might need now like insurance that covers the pastor who's playing with kids or something. So I would suspect a lot of churches have this insurance. It's just not a thing anyone needs to think about, you would hope. Why does the meeting house give me multi-level marketing? Is that what it is? Yeah, vibes. Just off the logo, I get heavy LuLaRoe knockoff pheromones. Yeah, they're so generic with their naming that it sounds like every yoga pants or face cream business, and all these pastors think they are their own boss. No accountability. Regular citizens can't get decent dental insurance coverage, but these people can get insurance for something like that? What? No kidding. No kidding. There's no like Obamacare for sexual abuse coverage for churches. Weird, I hate insurance companies, but refusing insurance to people may help. Refusing flood and fire may wake people up too, but this is wild to me. I was thinking about Florida, where so many of the property owners need insurance for their properties. Why? Because of climate change and because of the weather being so bad. And the premiums are getting so high for so many people that it's becoming unaffordable, to the point that, and I could be wrong here, I think Florida had to create its own state-run insurance program to try to cover people, because private insurers were like, yeah, this is getting out of hand and we can't cover because all of you are dealing with the same problem and we can't keep in business because of this stuff. Oh man. Has Hemant ever trolled us and talked about how this pastor got in legal trouble recently, and we're all thinking it's sexual assault, but it's something like tax fraud? I'm trying to think of if that has happened. I mean, that's a great idea. I'll think about that in the future. You know what? While you were doing this, was there any other question there? I was looking for a specific story, um, and I'm trying to figure out where it went. Just checking for one thing. Entertain yourselves for a second while I find the thing I'm trying to find. This is so weird. I can't find the thing I was looking for, but I wanted to talk about it, but whatever. You know what? I'll save that till the end and we'll see if I can get to it later. Okay. You can put that back up for a second, Den. That was fun. Yeah, pay your friendly atheist insurance. Subscribe. By the way, that right there, that's my newsletter. That's where my articles go. You could subscribe to that for free, but it will ask you if you want to donate, but I would appreciate that. Okay. I'm going to jump to a totally different story here. Let me pull this. Here we go. Closing tabs takes up like half my live stream, doesn't it? Okay. There's a story that I got very little coverage this week because the Democratic Party is currently on fire. But more than a dozen congressional Democrats this week basically said to the IRS, hey, get your shit together because you're allowing right-wing Christian organizations to call themselves churches and cheat the system. I found that fascinating, and I know why it's not getting media attention, but I thought this was a story. If you're not familiar with this, you might want to know about this. All of this basically boils down to transparency, and I'm going to show you what this is about here. A couple of years ago, a group called the Family Research Council, which is one of those right-wing Christian hate groups, they said, hey, we're not a right-wing nonprofit group like the ACLU. We're not a nonprofit group like the ACLU or Planned Parenthood or the NRA. We're a church. And they went to the IRS and they said, yeah, we're not just some nonprofit organization with that has right-wing views on like certain causes. You need to declare us a church, or in their case, an association of churches, and classify us that way. And the IRS said, okay. And all of a sudden, the Family Research Council was considered a church in the eyes of the government, even though it's very much not a church. And this is a story that's been going on for a while now. And if you're not from the US or you're not familiar with this tax, basically, here's what you need to do to make sense of this. All nonprofit groups in the United States are basically given a tax-exempt status by the US government. And what that means is it incentivizes people to donate to those organizations because nonprofit groups, in theory, are doing something not to make money for themselves, but to improve society in whatever way they think would improve society. But there is a catch to that. The catch is you have to file some paperwork with the IRS every year called a Form 990, a Form 990, that basically tells the government, this is how much money we made this year. This is how we spent that money. This is how much our top staffers made in salary. This is who the biggest donors were to our organization. Basic stuff like that, because the public has a right to know how much you're making. It'll help impact, whether they want to give you money or something like that. And those 990s are all public documents. Anyone can read them. They allow the public to keep tabs on whether you're living up to your stated mission. But importantly, very importantly, the rules I'm talking about do not apply to churches or any religious place of worship. Even though they are nonprofits themselves, they get special rules. They do not have to fill out the 990s. They do not have to make those details public. That means there's a reason you don't know how much a megachurch pastor makes for their salary. There's a reason you will see articles every now and then that say, here's a megachurch pastor's mansion, because this guy makes bank. How much money does that pastor make? We don't know because it's not public information. They don't even tell the congregation because they don't have to. There's no law requiring them to say it. We also then don't know how much of the congregation's money is going into their pockets. We don't know who the biggest donors are to these churches. More importantly, we don't even know if the money is going where the church says it's going. They may say like 75% of the money we take in goes to mission trips and things, but we don't know that because there's no auditing of that sort of thing. And speaking of auditing, and this is important as well, guess what? If you're a church, you don't even necessarily get audited. This is the IRS site. Look at this. This is a rule that has changed in recent years. Look at what I highlighted here. If some IRS official says we want to investigate the books of a church, they're not allowed to do an audit. The IRS may begin a church tax inquiry only if an appropriate high-level Treasury official reasonably believes, on the basis of facts and circumstances recorded in writing, that an organization claiming to be a church or convention or association of churches may not qualify for exemption. Think about that. If you think some corporation or some millionaire somewhere is not paying taxes, the IRS has auditors who can go in and say, we want to look at your books. Like you may have seen news this week that the IRS recovered more than $1 billion from millionaires who had not paid their taxes. Why? Because they were going through the books and saying, we don't think this person paid the money. Let's go talk to them and basically make them pay what they owe. Well, guess what? They can't do that to churches unless someone at the top of the pyramid at the IRS says, I'm personally signing off on this. All of that is to say, churches, if you are counted as a church, you're less likely to get audited. That's how good it is to be a church, right? There's also other benefits. This is another thing. There is a law called the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. But I'm not going to bother trying to tell you what that means because I'm not sure. But church plans are not subject to it. They get to avoid that law because they're a church. So, it's really nice if you can get the IRS to call you a church because it means you get to avoid all kinds of accountability. And I don't love that. And it's kind of it's totally unfair that churches or houses of worship get these special carve-outs that other secular nonprofits are not able to utilize, And there have been lawsuits about that in itself. They haven't gone anywhere. But anyway, that's the situation. You may also know that the IRS, then this gets to the question, well, how do you get counted as a church? And the IRS actually has a list. This is the IRS's website. And again, there is I think 14 bullet points that say, this is what it takes to count as a church. You need a distinct legal existence, a recognized creed and form of worship, a distinct religious history, literature of its own, an established place of worship, regular congregations. If any of this seems familiar, there's a whole bit John Oliver did 10 years ago about televangelists, where he actually went through this entire list and said that it's so easy to be called a church that John Oliver and Last Week Tonight set up their own church because it's that easy to do. But the IRS has this list of rules that say, all right, how many of these do you need to follow to be declared a church? Doesn't say. It just says, some amount of these is what you need. If you check off a handful of these things, we'll call you a church. Okay? So, this is the situation we find ourselves in. And in 2018, there was reason, we first saw reporting in 2018 that groups like Focus on the Family, that Christian nonprofit group, had declared itself a church, even though it was totally not a church. And this is from the website Right Wing Watch that really did a nice investigation on this. Look at what they said. How did Focus on the Family get around all these rules? And in their letter to the IRS, the attorneys for Focus on the Family claimed that their 600 employees are its ministers and its members of the congregation. Oh, and by the way, our cafeteria, our chapelteria, hosts our worship services because that's our place of worship. Oh, and by the way, our board of directors are our elders. Our president is our head deacon and elder. Listeners to our radio show are an extension of the congregation. Without question, Focus on the Family's members' daily work is worship. That's what their attorneys wrote to the IRS. And they said Focus on the Family believes that all of its members are ministers. And the IRS said, yeah, okay, we'll call you a church now. Like, that makes absolutely no sense because they're clearly lying. But the IRS said it was cool. And it wasn't just the family, other groups did this too. There's a website called Ministry Watch, which is like a watchdog group for Christian ministries. They ran this article in 2020 where they said this is happening everywhere. Ministry Watch has identified a growing trend among Christian ministries to identify as churches and thereby withhold their Form 990s. What groups are we talking about? Campus Crusade for Christ, Gideon's International, Joyce Meyer Ministries, Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Oh, and by the way, look at this. Joel Osteen, Creflo Dollar, Benny Hinn, Kenneth Copeland. They all have Christian ministries. They all want the IRS to declare their ministries churches. So, like, this is now a thing that just happens, okay? So, all of this is going on. A lot of these groups, if you ask them why are they doing this, the Washington Post did an article about this in 2020. This is what they said. A spokesperson for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association pointed to a statement that explained why the ministry changed its status. It said that the ministry operates with churches, that it feels better protected from government interference when it's characterized as a church, and that filing a 990 consumed time and resources. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association has like tens of millions of dollars at its disposal. And they're like, yeah, but hiring one CPA to do our taxes every year, that's so much. And they don't want government interference as if the government has ever interfered with a church ministry. These people just lie over and over. But that's their excuse for why they want to be declared a church. Not that we just don't want anyone knowing how much money we're making, which is totally the reason they're doing this, okay? So, going back to the story that we started this out with, okay? The Family Research Council is currently one of the big players in right-wing propaganda groups and all that, and they are, as of a couple years ago, a church in the eyes of the IRS. For the same reasons I just mentioned, all of this is very shady, it's unethical, it's so typical of right-wing Christian groups. Family Research Council actually said they fulfilled 11 bullet points on the IRS's checklist for church because they say we work with 30,000 partner churches in the work that we do because they provide information to a lot of churches. Basically, if you've ever signed up for their mailing list, they're like, we work with you now. Your church and us are now a thing. And so they say, we're not a church ourselves, but we're a whole association of churches, as if they are an umbrella group that oversees churches rather than some group that just happens to work with them, right? Totally shady. So in 2022, a couple years ago, I'm going to show you this. A handful of Democrats sent a letter to the IRS. This is sent to Janet Yellen, who's the Treasury Secretary, and Charles Rettig, who is the Commissioner of the IRS. Look at the date, August 1st, 2022. And they basically said, hey, why the hell is Family Research Council considered an association of churches? It's totally not a church. It's totally not an association of churches. They don't fit your bullet points. And honestly, I don't even know why it's limited to FRC because, like I said, Focus on the Family. Other right-wing Christian associations do this. So, but they limited it to FRC. And this letter basically says, look, we see what your rules are for defining a church. And given that FRC, Family Research Council, is an advocacy organization and not a church, we urge the IRS to review why are they tax exempt as a church? Like, have you given these church labels to other advocacy groups, even though they don't fit your own requirements? We request that you provide a timely update on this. Sincerely. And look at this. We got Susan Delbene. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She's a member of Congress. Jared Huffman, who's the only openly humanist member of Congress, and a handful of other Democrats as well. So they sent that letter in 2022. As soon as they did, you can predict the Family Research Council was very upset about this, because how dare you persecute them? This is what they told Fox at the time. This is nothing new for Democrats, FRC co-founder Tony Perkins told Fox News Digital. They want to silence all religious organizations. They really ought to get their facts straight, because the facts that are advanced in this letter are inaccurate. We are not a church. We are what is recognized as an association of churches because we work with churches. We've got about somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 active churches that we work with. We have a number of ordained members of our staff, so we work with churches. Democrats are trying to use any lever they can to silence Christians. Like, again, just because you work with churches, they do not have 15,000 churches on their payroll. Like, literally, I think FRC just has a huge mailing list and they just say this counts as all these churches that we represent. So they pretended this is persecution, but the IRS is obligated to respond to those Democrats. So in November of 2022, they got a response. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it's a form letter. It says, "Thank you for sending us this letter. We hear you. We see you, and we're totally gonna explore the stuff you sent us, and that's it." Like, let me tell you what the rules are for churches. What else did they say here? They basically said, we'll look into it. Okay, that's the whole letter in a nutshell. We'll look into it. That was 2 years ago. They didn't look into it. Nothing happened. Okay, there's your prelude. What happened this week? This is the story I said got no attention because of everything happening with the Democratic Party. This week, those same Democrats, whoever is still around from a couple years ago, they sent a follow-up to the IRS saying, "Hey, IRS, what the hell? You still haven't fixed any of this. We still haven't heard back from you from like 2 years ago," right? So basically, this letter, again, from Jared Huffman, Susan Delbene, and a bunch of other Democrats, they basically say this time we have specific requests. Okay, there are 5 bullet points here. Basically, what they're saying is they want to know 5 things. What changes has the IRS made when it comes to groups applying for church status to make sure non-churches do not sneak through? Fair question. That's number 1. Number 2, does the IRS investigate whether a potential church qualifies as such? Like, remember that bullet point list of like 14 things? Do some of those count more than others? Like, do you have to get 6 of them to be counted as a church? What is the rule here? Tell us what the rules are. Number 3, what other tools does the IRS rely on in assessing whether a supposed church is in fact a church? Like, is it just their description of who they are, or do you use anything else? Does someone go in and check the premises to see if it really is a church? Number 4, what other groups like Family Research Council have claimed to be a church and then stopped filing 990s? Good question. How many other ministries, how many other groups are basically using this as an excuse to avoid transparency? Is this just a Christian thing? Are other people doing this as well? Interesting question. And the last one, do the current IRS rules for what counts as a church prevent abuse of the system? And if not, what changes need to be made for the sake of public accountability? Which to me says, hey, IRS, if the system right now is not working for you, what law do we need to pass to give you the tools you need to crack down on this? All of those are really, really good questions. I want to know what the IRS answers to all that are going to be. But that's what Jared Huffman shared this week. They called on the IRS to review church status for political advocacy organizations. Because again, they're not saying you got to shut down FRC or focus on the family. This is not anti-Christian. They're saying those are political advocacy groups. Those are cause-based nonprofits. So treat them as such. Stop letting them call themselves churches to avoid any sort of scrutiny. I think that's a fair question. It's not persecution. I'm very curious to see what the response is going to be. So I'm so glad they're doing this. These are questions that need to be answered. I'm going to stop there. I will take questions here. Oh, that's a very generous donation, Keith. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And thank you, Julia, for that super sticker. I appreciate that as well. Isn't there language in the nonprofit agreement for church specifically forbidding political endorsement? Or is conservatism a religion now? Is Trump the golden calf? Yeah, I mean, the basic rule by the IRS is if you're a nonprofit organization of any kind, not just a church, but the ACLU, the Planned Parenthood, anything like that, you cannot make political endorsements. You can't play politics, basically. We're giving you a perk from the government. You do not get to tell people how to vote. And as I've covered many times before, there are a lot of conservative Christian churches that violate that rule all the time. And the IRS has not cracked down on any of them. It hasn't happened ever. Maybe once in the past 50 years. And even that was an egregious case. So that's a separate problem that the IRS needs to resolve, separate from the one I'm talking about here. But yeah, there is language that specifically says you can't play politics here. It's called the Johnson Amendment. And Republicans want to repeal that. They tried with Trump. It didn't work because he didn't do anything. But he said he did. But that is the rule. The IRS should be revoking their tax exempt status. They just don't. It seems to me that if we're going to allow churches to not pay their fair share, at least we can expect knowing that they do something positive in the community. Yeah, I'll even broaden that a little bit. The least they should be able to do is give their own members and the public transparency. I don't think it's asking a lot to say, listen, you're a nonprofit group. We should know how much money you take in, where it's being spent. And if it's being spent to further Christianity, that's fine. If that's the purpose of your church, so be it. But let people know exactly how much the money is going there, because don't you want to make sure it's going to the right places? Like if the pastor is making millions of dollars every year and the mission trips are getting underfunded, don't you think the members of that church deserve to know that? But these churches are never going to be transparent if they don't have to be. And the fact that it would take the IRS to make them do the right thing, that tells you a lot about their moral standing. I do think that when the nuns group gets bigger, churches will lose this deal. I also think we're a long way away from that, says Den. Maybe. That is true. I mean, listen, there are nonprofit groups, secular groups, atheist groups. They are considered nonprofits, but what they have done yet is declare themselves churches, which could be a fun experiment if you wanted to. I wonder if Freedom from Religion Foundation has tried to do that in the past. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think they did try once to say, our presidents are co-ministers, so we should be able to get housing perks. I think they did file a lawsuit a while ago saying that. I can't remember how that played out. Waiting for you to call close tabs is a small price to pay for you to cover all these nutters so we don't have to spend hours scrolling. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. I don't think you're allowed to say it's a tax write-off when you subscribe and like for free, but it's a good thing to do. So subscribe and like and all that stuff. Okay, I'm going to get to a different story here. Oh, you'll enjoy this one. I have talked about this before. There is an organization called LifeWise Academy, and their whole thing is they offer Bible classes to kids to take during the school day. Like public school students can take Bible classes during the school day. And this is all part of something called released time. It's legal. It's nationwide. Basically, what it says is that if parents opt in, they're allowed to take their kids out of school for a certain amount of time every week in order to send them to religious education classes. So, like, maybe their local church has Bible classes, and the parents say, my kid has to go for an hour every week. And the parents will pick them up and take them to church and then bring them back. And, like, it's a legal thing that they're allowed to do. And the school has to let that happen. And Christians over the past several years have really weaponized this. And the way they've weaponized this is they said, you know what? Don't leave it to your church to try to take care of this. Why don't you let us do all the work? We'll create the curriculum. We will pay for the buses. We will take care of the teachers to teach your kids. All you got to do is, like, take your kids out of school or give them permission to leave school. We'll pick them up. We'll take them to our church. We'll bring them back to school. And LifeWise Academy has been, like, the biggest player in this game. Okay. And there are some rules about it. I've covered it in other videos in the past, so I won't go over everything. But the school, the public schools, technically have nothing to do with this. That's why they're not paying the buses. They're not teaching any of this stuff. The kids are expected to make up whatever they miss in school. So, like, the school's not doing anything wrong here. That's why it's legal, right? But this is a problem because it's kind of a religious indoctrination camp. This is all Christian nationalism fever dreams right here. But the reason I bring all this up, because, again, I've talked about all the problems with all of this in the past, the coercion that goes into it and all that. And I just want to show you, if you haven't seen this before, this is the website for LifeWise Academy. Look at their front page of the website. Every week, tens of thousands of public school students legally attend LifeWise Bible classes during school hours. Like, that's their selling point. We take your kids out of those liberal public schools and we send them to conservative Christian indoctrination camp. There was actually an article published this week in a local news station. What is that? WOSU Public Media. That LifeWise Academy will be in 525 schools in 20 states next school year, right? So this whole thing is getting very, very popular. Okay. The reason I bring all this up is because recently there is a group that started their own website to try to counter some of this. And they're called Parents Against LifeWise. The website is parentsagainst.lifewise.online. But basically, this website says, here's what LifeWise Academy is doing. Here's the sort of thing they're teaching. Here's why it's problematic when you pull your kids out of the school, public school, like once a week for a long time. They basically go over a lot of the stuff I just mentioned to you. And that's wonderful. Like, they're trying to make parents more aware of what the problems with LifeWise are. And that's a good thing. Like, awareness campaigns like this, more power to them. They also have a private Facebook group that does all this as well. And that's great. It was started by two people, Zachary Parrish and Molly Gaines, and they highlight all the problems. They also pointed out, by the way, I did not know this before, they pointed out that LifeWise Academy says it does background checks of its volunteers, teachers. Those background checks are surprisingly superficial. Like, they miss a lot of stuff, which is very disturbing. The website points out that a lot of the teachers of their classes don't have any real teaching credentials. And they point out that the goal of this program is not to educate kids about Christianity, but to convert them. Like, LifeWise makes it very clear their goal is to convert kids to Christianity. So all of that so far is fine. This week, though, this website and the guy behind it got in trouble. LifeWise Academy is now suing Zachary Parrish, one of the guys in charge of this website. And according to their website, and according to their lawsuit that they filed, what they basically say is that Zachary Parrish pretended to be a volunteer to teach their classes, got access to their system, like the back end of their system, was able to download their entire curriculum, which means like textbooks, PDFs of all the lessons, all the videos that they teach kids with. And then he published them on his anti-LifeWise Academy website. And they're saying that's totally illegal and he can't do that. And I want to show you one part of this lawsuit in particular, because I don't think I have laughed this hard in a really long time. Check this out. We're gonna zoom in because I don't want to give this away immediately. But look at starting at number 7. Mr. Parrish published internal LifeWise documents and the entire copyrighted LifeWise curriculum on his website. LifeWise tried multiple times to reason with Mr. Parrish to remove the LifeWise curriculum from his website, but Mr. Parrish refused. In response to LifeWise's cease and desist letter, Mr. Parrish responded with the meme stating, "It's called fair use, bitch." No comma. Just, "It's called fair use, bitch." Number 10. No, it's not. And LifeWise is entitled to relief. Oh my God, I love that whole page. Look at that. Look at it. It is glorious. So look, here's the thing. If this dude got into their system, got all their content, published it online, posted it for everyone to see, he's totally in the wrong. Legally speaking, he absolutely cannot do that. Okay. I will offer the standard I am not a lawyer disclaimer here, but LifeWise is totally going to win this lawsuit. Okay. Because posting their curriculum online is not, in fact, fair use, bitch. Fair use would be like, here's a screenshot of something they use in their class, and it's really disturbing, and here's why. Like, if I was reading a book written by some crazy, if Ken Ham, if that creationist Ken Ham published a book, and I said, this book sucks, and I'm going to write a review of it, and I'm going to tell all of you why it's really bad, I could absolutely say, look at this little paragraph he has in his book, and then I'm going to tell you why it's wrong. I could totally do that. That is fair use. I could take a little screenshot from his book and say, this is why it's wrong. That's fair use. What I cannot do is say, here's the PDF of his entire copyrighted book. You can download it. You can't do that. For the same reason, you won't find like legal PDFs of like the Harry Potter series online. For the same reason, you won't find like a 3-hour movie, like whatever new Despicable Me movie. You won't find it on YouTube unless someone bootlegged it and uploaded it. But that's wrong because it's illegal, because that's their stuff. That's their creation. They invested the money. It's their property. You can't steal it like that. That's copyright infringement. So like LifeWise is totally within its rights to say you can't take our material and make it public like that. LifeWise also says in the lawsuit that they have legal obligations here because they say we based our entire thing on a project run by the Southern Baptist Convention called the Gospel Project. Like they use liberally from this thing called the Gospel Project, and they pay the Southern Baptists a licensing fee based on how many students take their classes. And their agreement says we don't distribute this stuff to the public. Like, it's not like their supporters get it for free either, because LifeWise chapters have to pay a fee to the organization to access content. So for all these reasons, LifeWise is saying this dude cannot just post our stuff online. So look, Robert Parrish, he screwed up. He can't do this. Instead of posting select examples of malfeasance or misinformation or religious hypocrisy, he uploaded everything online so everyone could download it, while other parts of his website highlighted the problems. And the only reason any of this stuff came down is because his website is published on the website WordPress. And so LifeWise went to WordPress and said, hey, you're hosting this content. Take it down. We're suing you. And WordPress took it down. And there is an argument to be made by Parrish where he says, I'm just trying to show people what they're teaching. That's his argument. I'm just trying to expose them. I'm trying to show the world what it is they're teaching. I mean, why are they mad about it? They're trying to spread the gospel. I'm helping them out, right? And LifeWise says, for anyone who wants to know what we teach, we offer a comprehensive 27-page summary of our curriculum. All you got to do is give us like your zip code and you will get that information. So they're saying we already provide enough transparency. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. This is not fair use. Parrish is going to lose this case. Now, two things about that. One is he started a GoFundMe, or actually his partner on the website started a GoFundMe, Stand with Parents Against LifeWise. They've actually raised $8,000 of their $10,000 goal. And what are they trying to do? All money raised will go toward legal counsel and fees to further our cause. I happen to think that's money going down the toilet because he's going to lose this case. It's not particularly controversial at all. So whatever, you can donate if you want. Second thing is, I did ask Parrish personally, like, you really think you did nothing wrong here? Like, what are you going to do when the court strikes this down? And I will show you what he said to me. Or I'll read what he said to me. He said, if I'm wrong, and if the courts decide I violated the law, I will accept that. My general position, however, is that parents and educators have a right to know what curriculum is being taught to their children. And I get where he's coming from, but also can't upload someone's material online like that. One other thing in the lawsuit, it says that he used unauthorized means to access all this stuff, as if he hacked into the system and downloaded everything. LifeWise says in the lawsuit that Parrish used unauthorized means to obtain the password-protected LifeWise curriculum only accessible by paid employees of LifeWise who have been issued login credentials, which suggests that he hacked into their system. I asked him about that. I'm like, did you hack into their system? And he said, no, I used my regular old Gmail account. And then there are videos that LifeWise gives to their volunteers that say, like, this is how you teach the classes. And I watched one of those videos, me personally, I watched one of those videos, and the lady in the video literally said the password in the video. And that's how this guy got access to all their content. So he didn't hack into anything. He literally just used the information that they made available to him. Now, they may have restricted access since that time, but it's not like he had to be some computer genius to their system. I asked him about the copyright issue. He said that fair use is still his defense. He has no intention of backing down without a court order. I happen to think that court order is coming very soon. Now, he's going to lose. That doesn't mean he has to stop criticizing or publicizing what LifeWise does, because they give you plenty of fodder. And I mean, the biggest thing LifeWise has going for it is that a lot of parents don't know how awful it is. Like, taking a kid out of school once a week has a lot of ripple effects that are really bad. And I want people to write articles and share word about what they're doing and why it's problematic and why decent parents should avoid it at all costs. I'm just saying, you don't need to republish their entire chapter textbooks. You don't need to republish it all publicly in order to get people that information. Because look, no one's going to read it. No one reads anything. You can just tell them what's in it and why it's a problem, and you'll be fine. So it's fair use, bitch. Not going to work. Sorry. I'll stop there. What questions do we have here? Is this program only good for Christians? Can the Church of Satan do this as well? Funny you mention that, because no, it's not limited to Christian. The released time thing kind of says if any group wants to say, like, we have a curriculum, we are going to teach kids about Satanism, great. But think about this. They need kids willing to come to their classes. They need parents willing to sign off on it. The satanic group would need to provide transportation from the school for those kids. They would need to have a place to teach them all this stuff. They would need to have a curriculum in place. Now, the Satanic Temple, I believe, has said they are working on putting this stuff together. But just because they put it together doesn't mean anyone's signing up to take it yet. But yes, in theory, anyone can do it, but Christians have weaponized it. Yeah, it's not fair use, but it's fucking funny. Yeah, it is. At least he used the correct it's. There you go. No comma, but he does have that. Yeah, like and subscribe. You can't republish my videos. I need these videos. But watch the videos, share the videos, link to the videos. I appreciate that. Give me 1 second to close up some stuff here. Should we talk about the 10 Commandments? Actually, I'm not going to talk about Louisiana's law because that seems like old news by now. I do want to. Let's do a couple interesting ones here. Let's talk about Ryan Walters. He's the superintendent of public instruction in Oklahoma. We've talked about him many times before. He's kind of one of those guys who just keeps failing upwards, doesn't know anything, but he's Christian. So he just gets higher and higher in Oklahoma politics. And now he runs the public schools, and he's using that as a playground for him to spread his own version of Christianity. But he's had kind of a rough couple of months now, because in the past few months, the Oklahoma Supreme Court shut down his taxpayer funded Catholic charter school that he wanted. They declared that to be illegal, and we'll see where that goes. Ryan Walters put together a bill to put Christian chaplains in public schools, but it didn't get signed into law. And he actually tried to get a bill passed to force the 10 Commandments in public schools, like Louisiana's done, but that bill didn't go anywhere either. So all this theocratic stuff that he's trying to do just isn't working out. So recently, he opened up a meeting of the State Board of Education and decided to double down on a way to force Christianity into public schools. I'm going to play you this video. It's about a minute long. Just two things. One, notice the pile of books he has next to him. But two, just notice how blatant he is about shoving his religion into public schools.
We're going to make an important announcement today regarding the Bible and the 10 Commandments. The Bible is a necessary historical document to teach our kids about the history of this country, to have a complete understanding of Western civilization, to have an understanding of the basis of our legal system, and is frankly, when we're talking about the Bible, one of the most foundational documents used for the Constitution and the birth of our country. We also find major points in history that refer to the Bible, that reference the Bible. So we will be issuing a memo today that every school district will adhere to, which is that every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Oklahoma in accordance with our academic standards and state law.
So that's horrifying. I mean, needless to say, everything he just said in that video is batshit insane and illegal. But just to cover a couple of the points, the Bible is not historical, even if like founding fathers who didn't understand evolution or have like toilets believed in it and made references to it. That doesn't make it historical. You definitely don't need the Bible to get that our ancestors just needed hope and they spread stories, and ancient mythology is all about suggesting answers to the unknown. And he said that every teacher will have to teach from the Bible. Like, why every teacher? Does that include math teachers? What about science teachers? PE teachers? Like, how far does that go? Which version of the Bible does he think should be taught to kids? Because even among Christians, there are many who don't accept the King James Version. Is he going to use the Trump Bible? When in their schedules, they're already packed and crammed schedules, are teachers supposed to find time to work the Bible into the classroom? Are they going to get paid for the work they got to do to make that happen? And what if they go the malicious compliance route and say, oh, I got to teach the Bible? All right, well, kids, let's turn to the book of Genesis and talk about why it's all BS. Does that count? Because that sounds like it could open a huge can of worms right there. So it's not just an illegal idea. It's completely thoughtless. It's a waste of kids' time. It's the sort of decision that I fear might make college admissions counselors think twice before admitting a student graduating from an Oklahoma public school. So Walters is so desperate to play the persecution card that he made up that he suggests this theocratic idea. And what's the end game here? I think he knows the state Supreme Court will not allow it and they will strike it down if this becomes a thing. And what's he going to do? He's going to say, well, they're after me. They're persecuting me because I'm Christian. Like, that's the game he's playing. He's going to suggest something awful to promote Christianity. And if it gets struck down, he gets to say they're persecuting me because I'm Christian. And I think he's also banking on the idea that Donald Trump will become president and make him the Secretary of Education because conservative Christians love this guy. I think that's why he's pulling these sorts of stunts. And Ryan Walters is what happens when you put the dumbest guy in your state in charge of public education. The students come last, religious agenda comes first. So he said in that video, I'm going to send a memo out to all these administrators, teachers today. That memo was somehow even more insane than the comments he just made. Let me show you this memo, okay? This went out to Oklahoma superintendents, like all of them. June 27th, he sent this out. Look at some of this stuff. Effective immediately. All Oklahoma schools are required to incorporate the Bible. Like, that's in there. As the Bible, which includes the 10 Commandments, as an instructional support into the curriculum across specified grade levels, like grade 5 through grade 12. What else does he say? The 10 Commandments. They will be referenced as an appropriate study of history, civilization, ethics, comparative religion, or the like, as well as for their substantial influence on our nation's founders and the foundational principles of our Constitution. Like, that, none of that is legit. The 10 Commandments that he's talking about were not foundational for any of that stuff. Later on here, he says, additionally, the State Department of Education may supply teaching materials for the Bible, which suggests government money will be used to promote the Bible. And then look at the last little threats here. Adherence to this mandate is compulsory. And then last sentence. Immediate and strict compliance is expected. Like, that's dictator shit right there. That's also a way to make sure no good teachers go into the education field in Oklahoma, which I think is also part of his goal. And all of this is unnecessary because the thing is, the Bible can already be used in public schools if a teacher feels it's relevant for like literary analysis or even historical reference if you're doing comparative religion or something like that. What he's doing is forcing his book, all of it, apparently, upon teachers, even if they don't want it. And he says he's going to use state resources to create materials for them to use. Like, the same people who say there's a pride flag in the room so that teacher's a groomer, they're now blatantly saying they want to use the Bible as an indoctrination tool in the classroom. Like, the threat is the story. And notice that Walters never says this is what teachers have been asking me for. This is what they're clamoring for. He doesn't say I spoke to educational experts who say this would be a good idea. He doesn't say if we teach the Bible, here's how students work, their grades would improve. He doesn't explain how kids are going to benefit from this. He just says this is what we're doing because he's a wannabe dictator. Like, there's no thought going into any of this because Walters and the Republicans who support him and vote for his party, they do not give a shit about public education. They also know young people are leaving organized religion, so they need to force it down their throats in other ways. And they have no ability to look in the mirror and say, like, maybe we're the baddies here. Maybe they're leaving because of all the shit we're doing. Like, to be clear, Ryan Walters' threats were condemned by a lot of groups, some of whom say they will sue if they have to put a stop to this. Because the weird thing is he sent out that memo, but that doesn't have the weight of a law. It's not really clear what the rules are, what the implementation is going to look like. Also, it's the summer. So, like, school doesn't even open up for at least another month. So, like, what the hell's going on here? How can you say this happens immediately? We're going to use the Bible now. Where? Summer school? No. So, like, nothing's happened yet. No lawsuits have been filed because I think people are trying to figure out, is this guy just bullshitting us? Is he just saying all this? Or does this actually carry the weight of the law? So, just to give you some examples here, the Freedom from Religion Foundation said they would think about suing if they had to. Walter's concern should be the fact that Oklahoma ranks 49th in education, says FFRF co-president Dan Barker. Maybe education would improve if Oklahoma's superintendent of education spent his time promoting education instead of religion. Right on. Here's Americans United for Separation of Church and State. This is textbook Christian nationalism. Walters is abusing the power of his public office to impose his religious beliefs on everyone else's children. Not on our watch. AU says we will go to court as well if we have to. So, like, they're all ready to go. There are also some lawmakers in Oklahoma who said this is dumb. Maybe the most interesting thing I saw here is that a spokesperson for the Attorney General even said, yeah, what the hell is he doing? Oklahoma law already explicitly allows Bibles in the classroom and lets teachers use them as in instruction, said a spokesman for State Attorney General Gentner Drummond. Gentner Drummond, by the way, also said that the taxpayer-funded charter school was illegal. He was on the side of church-state separation. So, like, for a Republican Attorney General, this guy's not the worst. So even the Attorney General's like, yeah, we don't need this memo because teachers can already do this, which is, I think, their way of saying nothing to see here. You can ignore the memo. Whatever he's saying, teachers already have the right to do it. But no one knows if Ryan Walters going even further is a rule. And what's the penalty if you don't do it? Because he didn't say what the penalty would be. And again, like I said, all of this is thoughtless. Ryan Walters didn't put any thought into this because this is a game for him. He doesn't take his job seriously. He doesn't care about kids. He's just a right-wing Christian conservative who was appointed to be like the education head and then got elected to this seat because he had an R next to his name on the ballot. But this is what happens when you elect Republicans. He's not going to stop unless Oklahomans stop rewarding the Republican Party for screwing over their own kids. And if you keep electing Republicans, you're only going to get more irresponsible wingnuts in leadership positions. All right, I'm going to pause there for this story. Let's take some other questions here. The Constitution was not based on the Ten Commandments, that is true, or the Bible, also true. All the rules in the Bible are about what the people can or cannot do. The Constitution is based on what the state can or cannot do. Right on. All of that is accurate. You know more than Ryan Walters does. Is Ryan's position an appointed or elected one? The superintendent of public instruction, which is the position he has now, I believe that is an elected position. But he's only there because he was appointed by Oklahoma's Republican Governor Kevin Stitt to be like the education secretary or something. So he got appointed. He used that platform to make a name for himself by doing shit like this. And then he got elected to do another education thing. They gave him more power. But because, again, in Oklahoma, it doesn't matter who you are as long as you have the Republican next to your name on the ballot. So my fear, I said this earlier, my fear is the reason he's doing all this is to make the case for why Donald Trump should make him Secretary of Education. You thought Betsy DeVos was bad? Just wait till this guy's in charge. All right. You could sign up for free to the newsletter. All right, I got a couple more stories, then I'll wrap it up. This one's, I think you'll find this one amusing. Guess what movie's coming out soon? It's your favorite. God's Not Dead 5. They're on number 5. It's technically called God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. God. All right, I said the last one. I made up the last one, but it really is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. Here's Here's a screenshot of what the trailer of the YouTube video. Like, this is a real thing. It's happening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this because maybe you're all familiar with the original God's Not Dead, but you have not paid attention to the franchise in a while here. Okay. The parts you need to know is that the main character is a guy named David Hill, who's played by the guy who kind of runs the movie studio. And in the last movie, like God's Not Dead 4, he defended Christian homeschooling against overzealous liberals in Washington who said it's not helping kids. And this time in God's Not Dead 5, he's going to run for Congress against an incumbent who warns people that you can't elect David Hill. He's a Christian nationalist. And I'm going to show you really brief clips because it's fair use. Here's one clip from the trailer.
We must maintain a wall of separation between church and state. Religion has no place in the public square.
As you could tell, the guy speaking is the incumbent who says very sensibly that we need separation of church and state. That's the bad guy. And the guy looking at him with a very serious look is David Hill, who's the Christian who's going to run against him. There's also one more clip I want to show you when they are finally running against each other, when David Hill jumps into the race as a proud Christian who's not afraid to talk about his faith on the campaign trail, much to the chagrin of his campaign manager. They're doing a debate, and the incumbent says, like, don't vote for this guy. He's a Christian nationalist. And here is what David Hill says in response.
Reverend Hill, your beliefs are a textbook example of Christian nationalism.
Whenever anyone of faith promotes a policy that you don't like, you label them a Christian nationalist.
And I'm only showing you those two very brief clips to give you a sense of what this movie is going to be about. Because just from those few seconds, you already know how this story is going to end. You know how it has to end. Also in the movie, that trailer, which you could find on YouTube if you're watching this right now, it is bookended by speeches from Ronald Reagan. There are cameos from Dean Cain, who used to play Superman, and Scott Baio, both of whom have since become like right-wing MAGA cultists. Mike Huckabee makes an appearance as a talk show host. Raymond Arroyo, who's another Fox News guy, he makes an appearance as the moderator of the debate. It's just MAGA cultism down the line. And by the way, what I don't get about this is, what does this have to do with the original God's Not Dead? Because God's Not Dead #1 was about like the Christian student and the atheist college professor duking it out over whether God exists. They're so not talking about that anymore. They're just trying to bank off of the popularity of the name of the first film without really taking anything of that's God's Not Dead. It has nothing to do with that anymore. Like, they're just trying to use the franchise to tell a different story. And so I don't get it. I've said this before, but the guy who made the movie could have literally just spent 2 hours beating a dead horse on camera, and they could have called it God's Not Dead, the horse gets it. And that film would be just as subtle as whatever they're doing now. Like, based on the trailer, there is no self-awareness about how white evangelical Christianity has hurt our nation. There's no reference to how white evangelical Christianity or Christian nationalism played a role in the January 6th insurrection attempt. There's no reference to Project 2025, which is an ever-present threat. Nothing about how red states are trying to force people to display the Ten Commandments in public schools, or how white evangelicals are going to use their muscle to elect a convicted felon who broke every one of their so-called values. So I don't know how ignorant and blind they could be to any of this stuff. The only other thing I want to say about this movie, is I don't know how well it's going to do. And I think they don't know how well it's going to do either, because I want to show you some numbers if you haven't seen these before. This is from Box Office Mojo, which covers like the statistics about movies. This is the original God's Not Dead. And if I scroll down here, like to the box office results, look at this number just over my head. This is how much money the film made many, many years ago when this came out. $60 million plus. That's how much money this movie made. And that's a lot of money. That really, God's Not Dead 1 really was a phenomenon when it came out in 2014, 10 years ago. $60 million, that's a ton. But look at this. God's Not Dead 2, when that one came out, this is the one with Melissa Joan Hart playing like a Christian teacher who referenced the Bible in class and then got sued over it. That movie, that one made $20 million, $21 million. Not bad. No complaints. I mean, they made money on that movie, but it's obviously a lot less than the first one. God's Not Dead 3, A Light in Darkness. Where's that one? Here we go. A Light in Darkness. We scroll down here. How much money did that one make? About $6 million. You see where I'm going with this. What about God's Not Dead 4? Which I know none of you even knew that was a movie, but it did. It existed. God's Not Dead 4 was only in theaters for 3 days. It made $1.2 million. So here's my question. At that point, when you're making $1.2 million on these movies, I don't even think you're covering your own costs, the production costs, the cast, whatever their salaries are, the marketing you got to do. There's no way it's all covered by $1.2 million. And that was God's Not Dead 4. How much could they possibly make with God's Not Dead 5? At this point, I have no idea what the purpose of this franchise is, because it's not getting reviews. It's not getting played in a lot of movie theaters. It's not making money for the company. Who are they doing this for anymore? And if you're just doing it for like Christians, why are you trying to keep the God's Not Dead thing going when you could just start a new franchise or something? Like, think smart. I don't get it. Anyway, this movie's going to be in theaters for another 3 days, starting on September 12th. So if you're bored and you hate yourself, I'm sure there's a theater near you that will play it. And if you miss it, I'm sure you could download it somewhere, watch it streaming somewhere like the next week. Because if you blink, it'll be gone. The good news is you won't be missing anything worthwhile. All right, I'll stop there. I had one more story I want to do after this, but I'll take questions here. If there are any. No questions, I don't think. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead. I want to get done. It's 9 o'clock. One last story. This is a little inside ball game stuff, but I figured you all would care about this. 2 of the biggest atheist groups in the country are actually in court against each other because they're fighting over something that's kind of surprising. And I was a little surprised when I heard this story, but I wanted to share this with you because I think you'll find it interesting. Basically, this involves the Freedom from Religion Foundation and American Atheists, 2 of the largest, most influential, oldest atheist groups in the country. And they're battling over like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the story here is this. Back in 2021, there was a man named Ronald Pelly. He's a donor. He died. He was old. And his family then had the responsibility of executing his will. And thankfully, he had written a will, gotten it notarized a while back. He basically created a trust in his name that left money to a handful of organizations. And here's the part of the trust that I wanted you to see. And I'm going to skip over the legalese here, but basically, you could see at the bottom here, his son's name is Robert Dennis, but this guy left 10% of his money to his son, who was also going to manage the trust. He left 45% of whatever money he had to FFRF, this atheist group. And he left another 45% to a group called Atheist Alliance of America. And I will just tell you, as an atheist who writes about atheism, as someone who has covered this movement for many, many years, I could not for the life of me tell you anything that Atheist Alliance of America does. They don't really exist except maybe on paper. I think they've since rebranded as some other group, but like they don't do anything. I'm not really sure why anyone would leave them any kind of money, but okay, this guy wanted to leave them 45% of his net worth or whatever it was when he died. Whatever, that's his right. People leave money to their cats when they die, whatever. Okay, so that's what you figured would happen when he died. The son would be in charge of making sure those two groups got the money. Fine. There's nothing weird about that. But in 2018, a few years before he died, apparently this guy hand wrote a new document that appeared to update what I just showed you. And I have a copy of this handwritten statement. You could see the date on it at the top, March 9th, 2018. And I've blacked out kind of the personal information, the address and things like that. But basically what he's saying right above my head here, you could see he says, I have money in two places, my IRA and my Fidelity charitable account. So those are my two sources of money. And he says here, I want to give my son 20%, not 10%, but 20% from each of those funds, which is an increase from what it was before. And look all the way to the left of your screen, next to the guy's name. Do you see what it says here? I'm going to scroll in here. Do you see that? It says same. Why does it say the same? Because theoretically, it's the same dude he mentioned in his original document. Okay, let's go back here. So he wants to give 20% to his son. Now there's Planned Parenthood Foundation of America. He wants to give them 50% of the IRA and 40% of the Fidelity account. Lots of money to Planned Parenthood. You can guess why. They do a lot of good work. And you could see to the left of Planned Parenthood, because they are new, what does it say? It says new. Okay. You can also see here, American Atheist, also new, has been added to the list. They get about 25% from both of his accounts. And FFRF is still on the list. They have a same next to number 4, and they only get 15% of his accounts now. They used to be at 45%. Now they're getting 15% of his accounts. So here's the thing. After this guy died, his son, I don't know anything about the son, but the son, I guess, is going through dad's papers, sorting through the stuff that is left behind. And he comes across this paper, allegedly. And he says, this is what my dad wanted. And they had already started going through the process of giving groups money. And now he sees this paper. So he goes to court and basically says, like, stop. This is what has to happen. FFRF has to give back some of the money. American Atheist has to get some money. Like, sorry, it's a little confusing here, but basically he said, however we were going to divvy up the money before, it has changed. But by the time he found this, and by the time it got to court, it turned out that they were using the updated document that I just showed you to give out the money. This piece of paper. This is what they were doing, which means American Atheist got a chunk of cash. FFRF got a chunk of cash. And they were getting all that money based off of this piece of paper. Except this piece of paper was not notarized. This piece of paper is not considered the official will left behind by the guy. And so why are they going to court? FFRF found out that this is not the original piece of paper. The original thing is the thing I showed you earlier that said they get 45% of the cash. So FFRF went to court and they basically said, you have to give us all the paperwork we need to verify that, like, the original document counts and that this one, does it count? Does it not count? Whatever. They asked the guy nicely. They said he's not giving it to us. So they went to court to try to get all the paperwork because they're saying you owe us a lot more money than what you're getting. American Atheist has now received a lot of money. And that means they have to go to court because the court says if FFRF wins, American Atheist has to give back all this money. And American Atheist says, no, this is what the donor wanted. He wanted to give us money. Why should we give it back? You can understand why this is a hot mess everywhere. Right? Like, it's troubling, but you understand why they're fighting about this. This is an actual lawsuit. You could see FFRF filed this lawsuit recently against the son, against the trust, And then they had to go against all the groups involved here because all of them are going to get affected by any change in the amount of money given out to these groups. It's just a huge hot mess. And basically, I spoke with both groups about this lawsuit. And what FFRF said is we have a fiduciary responsibility to our donors. And essentially what they're saying is this is not personal. We have no problem with American Atheists or any other group, but clearly this donor wanted to give us money. And for whatever reason, that money did not get to us because they were using the updated document. So we have a responsibility to make sure that whatever our donor wanted is what happens. And if we have to go to court to make that happen, we will do that. I get where they're coming from. American Atheists, on the other hand, is saying, well, the updated document reflects the real wishes of the donor, which is why we got money. And we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure money came to us. That's what the donor wanted. So they're going to court to fight this as well, because at this point, they've already received the money and they don't want to give it back. And they feel like it's worth fighting this in court in order to keep the money they've received. Now, I will also tell you that if we are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to these groups, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, based off of their tax forms, has a net worth of like $24 million. So if you're fighting over a few $100,000, it really doesn't affect FFRF's bottom line, even though they're going to court to get it. American Atheist has a budget of like $2 million. So a few $100,000 actually makes a huge difference to their bottom line. So it doesn't look great that a group with a lot of money is going to court to get a little bit more money when one of their allies that benefited from all the things that took place stands to lose a lot if FFRF wins. Do you know what I'm saying? And so part of me wonders, couldn't they just talk this out? Couldn't they say, you know what? Even though this is iffy about what the donor wanted, if it helps American Atheists and it doesn't help us, maybe we let this one slide. I wonder why that didn't happen. They, as far as I can tell, they did not communicate about this stuff beforehand, which is weird. Like they felt they had to go to court. FFRF also said, like, this is, like I said, FFRF said this is not personal. They have no animosity toward American Atheists, but they said in order for them to decide what to do, they needed a lot of documentation, and the family of the guy was not giving it to them. The only way they could get it is by going to court to do it, and this is what they got to do. So, like, again, I'm not a lawyer. There's a lot of money at stake here. I know why they're fighting about this. But part of me just thinks, like, these are two groups that work together. They have bigger fish to fry. And one group, American Atheists, could benefit a lot more from this. And I kind of wonder why FFRF isn't just letting this one go, even though I totally understand why they feel like they got to fight this. American Atheists told me they worried this sort of lawsuit would discourage donors from leaving them in their will, which a lot of nonprofits rely on those kind of legacy gifts to stay afloat. I mean, to me, I don't know that it would affect whether or not I want to give money to charity, but it would just make sure everyone in my family knows exactly what I want to have happen. And I'm not going to do it on a piece of paper and just hope they come across it after I die. One nonprofit lawyer I spoke to said donors shouldn't be worried about this. All you got to do is make sure you leave your money in capable hands. And if this guy's son is withholding documents from FFRF, that's the real problem. So you should be mad at that guy or something. I guess the last thing I'll say is, look, FFRF and American Atheists, they work together on a lot of things. They have overlapping issues. Christian nationalism is the bigger enemy. They work together on the Secular Coalition for America, that lobbying group. I hope this doesn't affect the way they work together, because I like both of the groups. I like a lot of the people that work with these groups. But I feel like this lawsuit is happening. There's no reason to pretend like it's not. So I wanted to share that with you. I think I'm going to stop there. I'll leave other stories till next week. I don't think there are any questions. So I'll just say, as always, you could support this channel by going here. Thank you so much to Den for helping with the moderation and for hosting the Discord party last week. And I should be back next week on Thursday night for this. And I'm going to try to cover everything I didn't get to tonight. So, yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. I know it was a long one.